The coffin was polished mahorol, gleaming under the gray October sky, and I stood there beside it knowing my wife wasn't inside. I'd received the message 3 minutes earlier, right as the priest closed his Bible. My phone buzzed against my ribs. I pulled it out with trembling fingers, expecting condolences from distant cousins. Instead, 4 words stopped my heart. I'm alive. Not inside. I looked up at my son Marcus and my daughter Claire, both dressed in black, faces solemn and tearless, standing on the opposite side of the grave. They didn't look at me. They hadn't looked at me all morning. And that's when the first spike of dread slid into my chest. Before I go any further, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. If stories like this pull you in, hit like and subscribe so I can keep bringing you more. The funeral was small. Margot had no siblings, and most of her friends had drifted away in her final years. Just me, the kids, a handful of neighbors who came out of politeness, and Father Callahan mumbling prayers he'd said 1,000 times before. The air smelled like wet earth and crushed leaves. I could hear the scrape of shovels waiting nearby, the low hum of traffic beyond the cemetery gates. Everything felt muted, like the world had turned down its volume out of respect. But my heartbeat was loud. Too loud. I typed back with shaking thumbs. Who is this? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, I can't say, they are watching us. My throat tightened. I scanned the crowd. Marcus stood rigid, jaw clenched, staring at the casket. Claire had her arms folded, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses even though the sky was overcast. Neither of them moved. Neither of them cried. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip open that coffin right there and prove to myself it was all some sick joke. But my legs wouldn't move. The phone buzzed again. Don't trust the children. I read it twice, 3 times. My vision blurred. Don't trust the children. I looked up, and this time Marcus was staring directly at me. His expression was unreadable, cold, like he was waiting for something. Claire turned her head slightly, just enough that I could see the edge of her mouth. Not smiling, not frowning, just waiting. The priest finished his prayer. People began to shuffle, clearing their throats, checking watches. A few approached me with quiet condolences. I shook hands. I nodded. I didn't hear a word they said. My mind was stuck on that message, on the polished wood of the coffin, on the way my children stood like strangers across from me. When the last guest left, it was just the 4 of us. Me, Marcus, Claire, and the box they said held my wife. Marcus finally spoke. His voice was flat, rehearsed. We should go, Dad. There's nothing left to do here. I stared at him. 42 years old, successful attorney, always composed, always in control. He'd handled all the funeral arrangements, picked the casket, chose the flowers, even wrote the obituary without asking me to review it. At the time, I'd been grateful. I was drowning in grief, couldn't think straight, couldn't function. But now, standing here with that message burning in my pocket, I wondered why he'd been so eager to take over. I want to stay a little longer, I said. My voice sounded thin, old. Claire stepped forward. She was younger, 38, worked in finance, sharp as a blade and twice as cold when she wanted to be. Dad, it's going to rain. Let's get you home. We'll come by later, make sure you're settled. Settled, like I was a problem to be managed. I said I want to stay. Marcus exchanged a glance with Claire. It was quick, barely a flicker, but I caught it. Some silent communication passed between them, something I wasn't meant to see. Then Marcus smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Of course. Take all the time you need. We'll be in the car. They walked away together, heads close, whispering. I waited until they disappeared beyond the line of graves, until I couldn't hear their footsteps anymore. Then I pulled out my phone and typed with trembling fingers. Where are you? The reply came instantly, like she'd been waiting. Somewhere safe, but not for long. They think I'm dead. They need me to be dead. You have to find out why. My chest constricted. I looked down at the coffin, at the brass handles, the spray of white lilies Claire had chosen. Margot hated lilies. She'd told me 100 times they reminded her of death. And yet there they were, covering her casket like a shroud. I crouched down, pressed my palm flat against the wood. It was cold, smooth, real. If she wasn't in there, then who was? Or what? I typed, "How do I know this is really you?" A pause. Longer this time. Then, "Our first dance was to Autumn Leaves. You stepped on my foot twice and I laughed so hard I cried. You said you'd make it up to me for the rest of our lives. You kept that promise, William." My breath caught. No one knew that. Not Marcus, not Claire. No one but Margot. I stood slowly, legs unsteady, and looked back toward the parking lot. I could see my son leaning against his black sedan, checking his phone. Claire was beside him, arms still crossed, posture tense. They weren't grieving. They were waiting. The rain started then, light at first, tiny cold pinpricks against my skin. I turned back to the grave, to the coffin that held a stranger, and whispered into the wind. "What did they do to you?" My phone buzzed one last time. "Find the will, the real one. It's not what they showed you. And William, don't let them know you're looking." The screen went dark. I tried to reply, but the message wouldn't send. Number unavailable. I stood there in the rain, alone beside my wife's empty grave, and realized I didn't know my own children anymore. Maybe I never had. And somewhere out there, Margot was alive, hiding, afraid of the two people we'd raised together. The question wasn't just what they'd done, it was what they were still planning to do. Didn't go home that night. I told Marcus and Claire I needed time alone, that I'd stay at the old cabin upstate where Margot and I used to spend summers. Marcus offered to drive me. I said no. Claire insisted on packing me a bag. I refused. The more they pushed, the tighter my chest got, until finally I just walked to my car and drove away, watching them shrink in my rearview mirror like shadows I couldn't shake. The cabin was 2 hours north, buried in pine trees and silence. I hadn't been there in 3 years, not since Margot got sick. The key stuck in the lock, and when the door finally opened, the smell hit me first. Dust and old wood and the faint ghost of her lavender perfume. I stood in the doorway, breathing it in, feeling the weight of her absence like a stone in my gut. But she wasn't absent. She was alive. Somewhere. And my children had put someone else in her coffin. I flipped on the lights. The cabin looked frozen in time. Her reading glasses still sat on the side table next to a paperback mystery she'd never finished. A coffee mug with her lipstick print, faded now to a pale pink ghost. I picked it up and turned it slowly in my hands, wondering what kind of monsters could bury their own mother alive in a lie. My phone had been silent since the cemetery. I pulled it out, stared at the dark screen, willed it to light up with another message. Nothing. Just my own reflection staring back, old and confused and scared. I looked like a man who'd lost everything. Maybe I had. I set the phone down and walked to the small desk in the corner where Margot used to pay bills and write letters. If there was a real will, something Marcus and Claire didn't want me to see, where would she hide it? I started with the obvious places. Desk drawers, filing cabinet, boxes in the closet. I found tax returns, medical records, recipes clipped from magazines she'd never gotten around to trying. But no will. Nothing that explained why my wife would fake her own death, or why our children would help bury the lie. Have you ever searched for proof that the people you love have betrayed you? Drop a comment and tell me, would you keep looking or walk away? I'm reading every single one. 2 hours in, my hands were filthy with dust and my back ached from kneeling on hardwood floors. I was about to give up when I remembered the loose floorboard in the bedroom. Margot had discovered it years ago, thought it was charming, called it our secret spot, even though we never put anything in it. I went to the bedroom and knelt beside the bed, running my fingers along the boards until I found the one that shifted. I pried it up with a butter knife from the kitchen. Underneath was a metal lockbox I'd never seen before. My heart hammered against my ribs as I lifted it out. It was heavier than it looked, and when I shook it gently, something inside rustled like paper. No lock, just a simple latch. I flipped it open. Inside were 3 things: a thick manila envelope, a USB drive, and a photograph. I picked up the photograph first. It was recent, maybe 6 months old, taken at Marcus's house during a family dinner. But someone had drawn on it with red ink. A circle around Claire's face, an X through Marcus's, and written at the bottom in Margot's handwriting, "They know." My stomach twisted. I set it down and reached for the envelope. My name was written across the front in her careful script. I tore it open and pulled out a handwritten letter dated 2 weeks before she died. Or before she was supposed to have died. "My dearest William," it began. "If you're reading this, then I'm either dead for real, or I've managed to disappear before they could finish what they started. I pray it's the latter. I don't know how to say this gently, so I'll say it plain. Our children are trying to kill me." The words blurred. I had to stop, breathe, read them again to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Trying to kill me. I kept reading. It started small. Pills that made me sicker instead of better. Appointments that got rescheduled, so I missed treatments. Marcus controlling my finances. Claire monitoring every doctor I saw. I thought I was paranoid that the cancer was making me lose my mind. But then I found the insurance papers. The policies Marcus took out on me without my knowledge. $750,000, William. That's what I'm worth to them dead. I confronted Claire first. She cried. She swore it was a misunderstanding. She hugged me and told me she loved me, and 2 days later, I collapsed in the kitchen. The doctors said it was a reaction to my medication, but I hadn't taken any medication that morning. Someone put something in my coffee. I know it was her. I started pretending to take my pills. I hid food I didn't trust. I watched them, William. I watched our children circle me like vultures, and I realized they were waiting for me to die. So I decided to die on my own terms. Dr. Halpern is helping me. He's the only one I trust. He'll make it look real. Death certificate, everything. There's a body, not me. Someone who donated themselves to science. Someone with no family. I know it's horrible. I know it's a sin. But it's the only way I survive long enough to prove what they've done. The real will is on the USB drive. Everything goes to you, William. Nothing for them. Not after this. When it's safe, I'll come back. I'll explain everything. But until then, you have to pretend you believe I'm gone. Don't let them know you suspect. They're dangerous, my love. More dangerous than I ever imagined. It was signed with her name and a small heart, the way she'd signed every love note she'd ever written me in 53 years of marriage. I sat there on the floor of our bedroom holding that letter, and I felt something crack open inside my chest. Not grief this time. Rage. Pure, cold, clarifying rage. My children, the babies I'd held, the kids I'd coached in soccer and helped with homework, the adults I'd been so proud of, had tried to murder their own mother for insurance money. And when that didn't work fast enough, they'd helped her fake her death and put a stranger in the ground just to keep up appearances. I looked at the USB drive. Whatever was on it, it was evidence, proof. Maybe enough to destroy them. My phone buzzed. I grabbed it so fast I nearly dropped it. Another message. "Did you find it?" I typed back immediately. Yes, the letter, the will, everything. 3 dots. Then, "Don't go home. They know you went to the cabin. Marcus is on his way." My blood turned to ice. I checked the window. Nothing but darkness and trees. But Marcus drove fast. If he'd left right after I did, if he'd been following, he could be here any minute. I shoved the letter, the photo, and the USB drive into my jacket pockets and ran for the back door. I didn't bother locking up. I just ran into the woods behind the cabin, branches whipping my face, pine needles slick under my feet. Behind me, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel, a car door slamming. Marcus's voice calling out, "Dad, you here?" He sounded concerned, loving even, like a son worried about his grieving father. I crouched behind a thick oak tree, hand pressed over my mouth to muffle my breathing, and watched through the trees as light flooded the cabin windows. Marcus moved inside, methodical, searching. I saw his silhouette pass from room to room. He went straight to the bedroom, straight to the loose floorboard. He knew. Of course he knew. And when he found the lockbox empty, he stood there for a long moment, perfectly still. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. He was calling Claire, telling her I had the evidence, telling her the plan had just collapsed. I waited until his car pulled away, until the red taillights disappeared down the dirt road. Then I stumbled back to my own car, hands shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stop moving. Because my son had just come to the place where his mother used to feel safe, and he'd come looking for secrets to bury. And I was next. I drove until my hands stopped shaking, which took almost an hour. No destination, just movement, headlights cutting through the dark like I could outrun what I'd learned. Eventually, I pulled into a roadside motel, the kind with flickering neon and doors that opened straight to the parking lot. I paid cash, used a fake name. The clerk didn't even look up. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner, but it had a lock and it wasn't the cabin, and that was enough. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out the USB drive, turned it over in my fingers like it might burn me. Whatever was on here, Margot had risked everything to preserve it. I didn't have a laptop, didn't think to grab one. But there was a business center sign I'd seen near the lobby, one of those sad little rooms with a desktop computer from 2015 and a printer that jammed every third page. I walked back out into the cold. The business center was empty, lit by a single fluorescent tube that buzzed like a trapped insect. I locked the door behind me and plugged in the drive. It took a moment to load. Then a folder appeared. For William, eyes only. Inside were 3 files. The first was a video. I double-clicked. Margot's face filled the screen and I had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from falling. She looked thin, exhausted, her skin pale against the dark circles under her eyes. But alive. Unmistakably. Impossibly alive. "William," she said, and her voice cracked. "If you're watching this, then you found everything. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry you have to learn about our children this way. I'm sorry I had to leave you in the dark." She wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. "I've been recording them. For months. Every conversation I could catch, every moment I felt unsafe. Dr. Halpern helped me set up cameras in the house. Tiny ones, hidden. Marcus and Claire never knew. What I found..." She stopped, looked directly into the camera. "What I found will break your heart, but you need to see it." The video ended. I sat there staring at the black screen, feeling the dread coil tighter in my chest. Then I opened the second file. It was a recording, dated 3 months ago. Security footage from what looked like our kitchen, the angle high and wide. Margot sat at the table with a cup of tea reading. The timestamp read 9:47 a.m. At 9:51, Claire entered. I recognized her immediately, the way she moved, confident and brisk, like she was always on her way to somewhere more important. She walked to the counter, glanced over her shoulder at Margot, then reached into her purse. She pulled out a small vial. My stomach dropped. She unscrewed Margot's pill organizer, the one we'd bought together, the one divided by day and time, and shook 2 pills out of the Tuesday morning slot. Then she replaced them with 2 from the vial. Calmly, methodically. She screwed the organizer shut, slipped the vial back into her purse, and walked over to Margot. "Morning, Mom," she said brightly. "Don't forget your pills." Margot looked up and smiled. Thank you, sweetheart. Claire kissed her forehead. Then she left. I watched Margot take the pills 10 minutes later, wash them down with tea, and go back to her reading. If you saw your own child poison someone you love, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I need to know I'm not losing my mind. The third file was an audio recording. No video this time, just voices. Marcus and Claire. I recognized the background hum, our living room, the antique clock Margot loved ticking faintly in the background. She's lasting longer than I thought, Marcus said. He sounded annoyed, like Margot's survival was a scheduling inconvenience. We've been at this for 4 months. The doctors are starting to ask questions. Then we increase the dosage, Claire replied. Her voice was cold, clinical. Or we do something more direct. Like what? An accident. She's weak. A fall down the stairs. A slip in the shower. It wouldn't be suspicious at this point. Everyone knows she's dying. There was a pause. I heard ice clinking in a glass. Marcus taking a drink. Dad would lose it. Dad will grieve and move on. He always does. And then we'll have the house, the accounts, the life insurance. All of it. We've earned it, Marcus. We've put up with her sanctimonious bullshit for decades. This is just collecting what we're owed. I stopped the recording. I couldn't breathe. The room tilted and I had to put my head between my knees, force air into my lungs. These were my children. I'd raised them. Taught them right from wrong. Walked Claire down the aisle at her wedding. Loaned Marcus money to start his practice. And they'd sat in my living room discussing the best way to murder their mother like they were planning a grocery list. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and typed. I watched the files. I heard them. The reply came within seconds. I'm sorry you had to see that. But now you understand. Where are you? I typed. Safe. A friend's place. Somewhere they'll never think to look. But William, you can't confront them. Not yet. We need the authorities involved or they'll twist everything. Make you look senile. Make me look crazy. She was right. If I walked up to Marcus and Claire with accusations, they'd have me committed. Grieving widower, lost his mind after his wife's death, can't accept reality. They were lawyers and financiers. They knew how to spin a narrative. What do? I sent. There's a detective, Maria Ortiz. She works financial crimes, but she owes Dr. Halpern a favor. He's already briefed her. Go to her. Show her everything. She'll know what to do. She sent an address, a police station 2 towns over. Then, I love you, William. I never stopped. And when this is over, we'll have the life we deserved. Just the 2 of us. No more poison. I sat in that buzzing, fluorescent room and let myself cry for the first time since the funeral. Not for Margot. She was alive. She was fighting. But for the family I thought I had. For the illusion that had just shattered into 1,000 cutting pieces. When I was done, I wiped my face, pulled the USB drive from the computer, and walked back to my room. I didn't sleep. I sat on the bed with the lights off, watching the parking lot through a crack in the curtains, waiting for headlights that looked too familiar. At dawn, I checked out and started driving toward the address Margot had sent. But halfway there, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Then something made me pick up. Hello? Silence. Then breathing. Heavy. Deliberate. Dad? Marcus. My blood froze. We need to talk, he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. You took something from the cabin. Something that doesn't belong to you. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. Claire and I have been very patient, very understanding, but you're making this harder than it needs to be. Making what harder? Letting go. Mom's gone. You need to accept that and move on. We're worried about you. You're not thinking clearly. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. Then come home. Let's sit down like a family. We'll sort this out together. Together. Like they'd sorted out Margot. I'll come home when I'm ready. Dad? His voice dropped, and for the first time I heard the edge underneath. The threat. Come home today, or we'll have to come find you, and you don't want that. The line went dead. I sat there on the side of the highway, engine idling, and realized I'd just heard my own son threaten me. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the man I'd trusted with everything. He wasn't coming to talk. He was coming to finish what he'd started with Margot, and this time, there'd be no faking my death. Just a grieving old man who drove off the road in his confusion. An accident. Tragic, but understandable. I pulled back onto the highway and pressed the gas pedal to the floor, racing toward the only person who might believe me before my children decided I was worth more dead than alive, too. Detective Maria Ortiz had gray streaks in her black hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen every lie the world had to offer. She didn't smile when I walked into her office at the precinct, just gestured to the chair across from her desk and waited. I sat down and placed the USB drive between us like a confession. "Dr. Halpern said you'd come," she said. Her voice was rough, a smoker's rasp. "Said you had evidence of attempted murder, insurance fraud. Said your wife staged her own death to stay alive." I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. She picked up the drive, turned it over in her fingers the same way I had. "Before we go any further, I need to ask you something, Mr. Castellano, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "William," I said. "Call me William." "William." She leaned forward. "Are you sure you're ready for what comes next? Because once I start this investigation, once I bring your children in for questioning, there's no going back. Your family as you knew it ends today." I thought about Marcus on the phone, voice cold and measured, threatening me like I was an obstacle instead of his father. I thought about Claire switching pills in Margot's organizer, kissing her forehead like Judas in the garden. I thought about the empty coffin we'd buried while Margot hid somewhere, afraid of the children she'd given life to. "I don't have a family anymore," I said. "I just have evidence." She nodded once, then plugged the drive into her computer. I watched her face as she opened the files, watched the subtle shifts, jaw tightening when Claire swapped the pills, eyes narrowing as she listened to Marcus and Claire discuss murder like a business transaction. When the audio ended, she sat back and exhaled slowly. "This is substantial," she said. "Video evidence of poisoning, audio conspiracy to commit murder, combined with the falsified death certificate and insurance fraud." She looked at me. "William, your children are going away for a long time." The words should have felt like victory. Instead, they felt like a funeral. She made 3 phone calls. I couldn't follow all the legal terminology, but I caught enough. Arrest warrants, forensic accountants, exhumation orders for the coffin to identify the body inside. They were going to dig up the grave. They were going to prove Margot wasn't dead. And Marcus and Claire were going to know everything had fallen apart. "We'll pick them up within the hour," Ortiz said, hanging up. "I'm sending officers to both their homes and their workplaces. They won't see it coming." "They'll run," I said. My voice sounded hollow. "They're smart. They'll disappear. They won't get far. We've already flagged their passports, frozen their accounts. Your wife was very thorough in her documentation. We know exactly how much they were planning to steal." She stood. "You should go somewhere safe, a hotel, a friend's house. Once they're arrested, the media will pick this up fast. You don't want to be home when that happens." I nodded but didn't move. I felt cemented to the chair, like standing up would make everything real. Ortiz's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression shifted. Something sharp and urgent. "We've got a problem." My heart stuttered. "What?" "Marcus isn't at his office. Claire's not at home. They're both gone." The room tilted. They knew. We moved as fast as we could, but... Her phone rang. She answered it, listened for 10 seconds, and her face went pale. "Where?" She snapped into the phone. Then to me. "They're at your house, both of them. Neighbors reported hearing shouting 20 minutes ago." I was out of my chair and running before she could finish the sentence. She called after me, but I didn't stop, didn't slow down, just burst through the precinct doors and into the parking lot. They were at my house. Our house. The place where Margot and I had built 53 years of life together. And they were there because they knew I had the evidence, knew their perfect plan had unraveled, and cornered animals do desperate things. I drove like a man possessed, blowing through stop signs, my old sedan shaking with the speed. Ortiz called twice. I didn't answer. I just drove, hands locked on the wheel, heart hammering against my ribs. When I pulled onto my street, I saw both their cars in the driveway. Marcus's black sedan, Claire's white SUV. The front door was hanging open. I parked crooked across the lawn and ran inside. Marcus! Claire! The house was wrecked, furniture overturned, drawers pulled out and emptied across the floor. They'd been searching for something. Maybe more evidence, maybe the original will. Maybe anything they could destroy before the police arrived. I heard voices upstairs, shouting. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my old knees screaming in protest. The shouting was coming from the master bedroom, our bedroom. I reached the doorway and froze. Marcus and Claire stood in the middle of the room, both breathing hard, surrounded by torn papers and emptied boxes. And between them, holding a small revolver I didn't know we owned, was Margot. She was thinner than in the video, her hair shorter and dyed dark, but it was her. Alive. Real. Standing in our bedroom pointing a gun at our children. Mom. Claire's voice shook, not with fear, with rage. Put the gun down. No. Margot's hands were steady. You don't get to tell me what to do anymore, neither of you do. Marcus saw me in the doorway. His face twisted into something ugly. Dad, thank God. She's lost her mind. She's been hiding, staging all of this, trying to frame us. I heard the recordings, Marcus. My voice came out cold, flat. I watched Claire poison you, Mom. I heard you both plan her murder. Claire's mask slipped. Just for a second, I saw something feral underneath. Then she smiled, and it was worse than the rage. You don't understand. She was dying anyway. We just accelerated the inevitable. The money was going to be wasted on treatments that wouldn't work. We were being practical. Practical, Margot repeated. Her voice broke. You tried to kill me for money and you call it practical? You were a burden, Marcus said. Simple, matter of fact. Sick, weak, expensive. Dad would have been fine. He would have moved on. But you just kept hanging on, kept draining everything, and for what? 6 more months of suffering? I looked at my son and realized I was staring at a stranger. Somewhere along the way, the boy I'd raised had rotted from the inside out, and I'd been too blind to see it. The police are coming, I said. It's over. Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. No, Dad, it's not. He pulled something from his jacket. Another gun, smaller than Margot's, but just as deadly. Here's what's going to happen. Mom's going to put her gun down. You're going to give me that USB drive, and we're all going to sit down and work out a new arrangement. One where everyone survives and keeps their mouth shut. You'd shoot us? Margot's voice was barely a whisper. Your own parents? If you make me. He aimed the gun at her chest. I've come too far to go to prison now. So yes, Mom. If you make me choose between my freedom and your life, I choose me. I'll always choose me. In the distance, I heard sirens. Claire heard them too. Her eyes darted to the window, then back to Marcus. We need to go. Now. Not without the drive. Marcus looked at me. Give it to me, Dad. Last chance. I reached into my pocket. Felt the hard plastic of the USB drive. Thought about everything on it. The evidence, the recordings, the proof of what they'd done. And I thought about Margot standing there, alive despite their best efforts, holding a gun with shaking hands because our children had given her no choice. I pulled out the drive, held it up. You want it? I said. Come take it. Marcus moved toward me. The sirens got louder. Margot's finger tightened on the trigger, And Claire ran. Just bolted for the door, shoving past me, her heels clattering down the stairs. Marcus spun toward her, distracted for just a second, and Margot lunged forward and hit his arm with both hands. The gun went off. The sound was deafening in the small room, and for a horrible moment I thought someone was hit. But the bullet buried itself in the wall. Marcus stumbled backward and Margot kicked the gun away, sent it skittering under the bed. Then the police were there, flooding through the house, shouting commands. Officers poured into the bedroom. Someone pulled Marcus to the ground, wrenched his arms behind his back. Someone else gently took the gun from Margot's hands, and I just stood there holding the USB drive, watching my son get handcuffed and dragged away while he screamed that we'd regret this, that we'd ruined everything, that he'd done nothing wrong. They caught Claire trying to start her car. Ortiz told me later she'd made it 3 blocks before a patrol car boxed her in. She didn't fight, just sat there with her hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead, face blank as a mannequin. At the station, they both lawyered up immediately. Refused to speak, but it didn't matter. The evidence spoke for them. The videos, the audio, the falsified documents, the insurance policies Marcus had taken out without Margot's knowledge. The body in the coffin turned out to be a Jane Doe from the medical examiner's office, someone who'd died alone and unclaimed. Dr. Halpern had falsified the death certificate, and he confessed everything in exchange for a lighter sentence. He said Margot had begged him, said it was the only way to stay alive long enough to prove what was happening. The trial took 8 months. I sat through every day of it, Margot beside me, our hands clasped tight. We watched our children sit at the defense table in expensive suits, faces cold and unrepentant. We listened to their lawyers argue that the recordings were taken out of context, that Margot was mentally unstable, that this was all a tragic misunderstanding. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts, attempted murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud, identity fraud. Marcus got 22 years, Claire got 19. When the verdict was read, neither of them looked at us. They just stared straight ahead, and I realized they'd never apologize, never admit what they'd done. In their minds, they were the victims. We were the ones who'd betrayed them. Margot and I moved away after that, sold the house, bought a small place by the ocean where nobody knew our story. We don't talk about Marcus and Claire. We don't visit them. They've written letters, mostly to ask for money for appeals, for commissary accounts, and we burn them unopened. Sometimes late at night, Margot will wake up crying. I'll hold her and she'll whisper that she wonders where she went wrong, what she did to raise children capable of such cruelty. And I tell her the same thing every time. We didn't fail them. They failed themselves. Evil isn't something you're taught. Sometimes it's something you choose. We chose love. They chose greed. And in the end, love survived. Here's what I learned. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and family is built through actions, not just shared DNA. The people who truly love you will never see you as expendable, never calculate your worth in dollars, never choose their comfort over your life. Hold on to those people. Fight for them. And if your own children betray you, remember, you don't owe them forgiveness just because you gave them life. Some debts are too dark to ever be repaid. I'm reading every single comment on this video, and I'll reply to as many as I can. If this story made you feel something, hit that like button. And if you want more real stories about survival, betrayal, and the strength it takes to start over, subscribe. Because the truth is always worth telling, even when it breaks your heart.